I sat in the back of the last truck, fingers tight around a folder stamped confidential. Site Dom Sensia. My destination? A man who once commanded nations. Alassane Ouattara, or what remained of him. Once he stood beside presidents, his voice shaping policy, his parades shaking the streets of Ivory Coast. Now he existed in the husk of an abandoned forest lodge, guarded by men who once saluted him. After the coup, they didn't exile him. They didn't cage him. They left him here, where the trees swallowed history, where power withered into quiet reflection. Not all prisons have bars. Some are built in silence, buried in shame, hidden beneath the whispering leaves of forgotten forests. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days, turning the Cassandra wilderness into a slick, muddy labyrinth. Our convoy, 3 unmarked tinted vehicles, no flags, no plates, rolled forward, engines growling against the Earth's resistance. I sat in the back of the last truck, fingers tight around a folder stamped confidential. Site Dom Sensia. My destination? A man who once commanded nations. Alassane Ouattara, or what remained of him. General Doumbia had granted me this visit. Let the world see, he said, what happens when power is detached from purpose. No camera, no phone, just a notepad, a pen, and 2 hours. The compound emerged like a ghost. 8 rotating guards, a radio post, solar panels humming under grey skies. A rotting sign read Reserve Forestier Interdit. No one would find him here. The guards moved with precision, their uniforms stripped of insignia. One nodded. He's awake. Their eyes scanned the trees, not to keep him in, but to keep his memory from escaping. The lodge was a carcass of colonial grandeur, peeling paint, ivy strangling the walls. Inside, a table, a chair, a mattress on the floor, and by the window, staring into the green abyss, sat Ouattara. He didn't rise, didn't blink. His clothes were worn, his presence reduced to stillness. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper of defeat. "You're here to write, aren't you?" I nodded. "Then write this down," he said. "They didn't defeat me with guns. They defeated me with memory, with silence. I'm pressed with both." He leaned back, and the weight of 10 years collapsed into the room. When rulers fall, it's not to swords or bullets, it's to stories retold without fear. And now I would hear him. "The most dangerous silence," he said, "is the one that arrives after you've been heard for too long." Ouattara sat forward, elbows on his knees, eyes low but steady. I thought I had time to fix it, to explain, but time is merciless when people start remembering. I said nothing, just wrote. He spoke not to justify, not to beg, but to narrate, as if unravelling his own myth for the first time. They loved me once, you know, the West. I was the golden boy, the economist. I sat with IMF directors, graced Time magazine. They called me the technocrat king, a bitter chuckle. But in that love I forgot my people, or worse, I traded them. He described the unravelling, how it began with good intentions, streamlining ministries, opening markets, inviting investors. They told me it was a modernization. It was monetization, a pause. The people didn't see hospitals, they saw debt. They didn't see roads, they saw tolls they couldn't afford. Then came the third term. The Constitution said no, but my advisors, the French, they said, "Do it, you'll win, you're needed." And I believed them, not because I craved power, because I feared irrelevance. His fingers pressed into his temples. When you've been crowned by outsiders, the worst fate isn't defeat, it's being forgotten by your own. His voice didn't crack from emotion, only exhaustion. They didn't rise with rifles, they rose with rejection, not a single word in my favour. That's what broke me. A prison needs no bars when regret becomes the room. The cabin was damp, the roof leaking near the kitchen. No staff, no entourage, just 2 rotating guards, a med kit and a locked trunk, all that remained of his reign. Inside, no phone, no pen, no map, only relics of a buried life. Ouattara reached in, pulled out a crumpled paper and handed it to me without a word. A contract, 2019. His government and a French oil conglomerate. 70% profits to them, 30 to Ivory Coast, minus logistics and advisory fees. 25 years. No public bidding, no disclosure. "I signed 20 of these," he said, "some worse." "Do you regret it?" I asked. "I regret believing we couldn't survive without them." A hollow smile. "And now? They survived just fine without me." The guards brought a tray, cassava bread, boiled yam and warm water. No silverware, no ceremony, just survival. He didn't eat, only stared. "They used to greet me with 9-course dinners," he murmured. "Now they won't even send a message." I asked if he'd expected France to intervene. "No," he said, voice like dry leaves. I outlived my usefulness. That's all I ever was to them. And when I couldn't hold the leash anymore, they let me go, like a dog with no teeth. Silence swallowed the room. Outside, a lone bird called. Inside, a man who once signed billion-dollar contracts sat with nothing but memories that had curdled into shame. This forest wasn't his punishment. It was his mirror, a place where no spin could protect him, no title could disguise him. Once, he dined under golden chandeliers. Now he slept beneath cobwebs and the weight of his own choices. Ouattara stood slowly, bones protesting, and shuffled to the window. The trees swayed indifferent. His shoulders hunched, not from age, but from the crushing absence of the legacy he thought he'd built. "Do you know what haunts me most?" he asked, fingers tracing the grimy glass. "Not the soldiers, not the revolution. It's the laughter I don't hear anymore." I waited. The applause, the polite chuckles at banquets, the handshakes, the illusion that I was admired. His breath fogged the pain. They were never laughing with me. They were laughing at what they could make me do. He turned. The dim light carved shadows into the grooves of his face. "The IMF told me to open borders. I did. The EU told me to restructure debt. I did. The French told me to run for a third term. I did. I said yes until I forgot what no sounded like. Did you ever fear the people?" "No." A pause. "Not until the last 6 months. Not until I realized they had stopped fearing me. Not until I heard chants, not for another party, but for no parties at all." His throat worked. "When I watched them celebrate my removal, I thought I'd be furious. But I wasn't. I was relieved. I didn't have to pretend anymore." He sank back into his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. The palace was a stage, and I was the last actor who didn't know the curtain had dropped. For dictators, the worst punishment isn't death. It's irrelevance. And in this damp cabin, Alassane Ouattara wasn't hated. He was forgotten. Some men leave statues, others leave scars no one dares memorialize. "Have you seen what became of your legacy?" I asked. A single nod. "They took down my portraits, burned them, but that's not what stings." His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "It's that no one spoke in my defense, not the markets, not the press, not even my own party." He opened a drawer, fingers trembling, and pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline had faded, but the words still cut. "No tears for a technocrat." "This came from Paris," he muttered. "Even they buried me politely." He moved to a cracked mirror nailed to the wall. It reflected only a ghost. "Do you know what the West hates more than an angry African?" he whispered. "A disposable one. A beat. And I became disposable the day I lost control of my people." His fingers dragged along the cabin wall, tracing cracks like the fault lines of his reign. "When Traoré in Burkina Faso spoke of sovereignty, I laughed. When Mali expelled French troops, I called it temporary. When Guinea nationalized its mines, I dismissed it as theatre." He stopped, the bitter twist of his lips barely visible in the dim light. "Now they build, and I hide." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl from a sky as indifferent as history. Inside, the man who once dictated terms to foreign dignitaries now whispered confessions to the shadows, not for vindication, but for the record. This wasn't defense, it was an autopsy. "I called myself a reformer," he said, voice frayed, "but I reformed nothing. I just modernized their chains and called it progress." I asked if he expected an official trial. His answer came sharp, like the snap of a gavel. "No. The trial already happened. It was in the streets, in the whispers, in the silence that swallowed my name." His palm pressed against the cabin's weathered wood. "I was in every speech, every headline, every banner. Now they speak of sovereignty, and don't even mention me. That is the punishment." His eyes locked onto mine, raw with a realization no coup could deliver. "Do you understand what it feels like to be erased? Not as vengeance, as healing." A crack in his voice, thin as ice underfoot. "There will be no statues toppled because none were built, no books burned because none were written. They won't even curse me. They'll just continue." The guards entered, murmuring in Dioula. He waved them off without turning. "They don't treat me like a prisoner, but they never call me Monsieur le Président. I am not detained. I am archived. Would you accept exile?" A ghost of a smile. Exile would be mercy, but no country wants a ghost. He exhaled, the sound like pages turning in an empty library. "I made history. Just not the kind anyone celebrates. Some leaders are remembered for how they fought, others for how they fell. I will be remembered for how thoroughly I was forgotten. Later, the guards permitted me to walk, 100 meters, no more. Just trees, silence, and the lingering spectre of a man who once dwarfed the state itself. The cabin had no internet, no news, just a radio tuned not to world broadcasts, but to Abidjan's community stations. He listens every day. A guard confirmed he listens every day. To the youth debates, the new proposals, the anti-coup rallies, not for him, for justice. I turned to one of the guards, his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. What do you think of the man inside? He didn't hesitate. He is the reason my village has no clinic, but I don't hate him. A pause. Ouattara's name, when spoken at all, came only in warnings. Never another Ouattara. That was the Ouattara era. We've burned that chapter. On a late-night radio show, a young poet's voice cut through static. He stood above us, but we were the roots. He fell, we did not. He disappeared. We did not look back. No demands for his return, no calls for vengeance. Because to demand, to try, to even speak of him would mean he still mattered. The greatest symbol of his defeat? He still breathed. Left alive, but scrubbed from history. Not executed, because he was no longer a threat. Not feared, not followed. Finished. As my convoy prepared to leave, I stepped back into the cabin one last time. Ouattara hadn't moved, still hunched by the window, a silhouette fading into the gathering dark. He didn't turn, didn't speak, until just as I reached the door, his whisper slithered through the damp air. Tell them. A rasp, a confession, a eulogy. I watched it all disappear, not with fire, not with rage, with silence. And at that moment I understood. They hadn't killed him. They'd simply replaced him. The general who overthrew him. Sekou wanted power. He didn't march through the capital in triumph. He didn't drape himself in gold or demand titles. Instead, he stood on a simple wooden stage, sweat glistening under the West African sun, and told the people, "We are not here to lead you. We are here to make sure no one ever rules you again." Back in the forest, Alassane Ouattara's name was never spoken again. Not in reverence, not in anger, not even in passing curiosity. His face disappeared from textbooks. His policies were erased, one by one. His signature, once scrawled across decrees that shaped a nation, was blotted from official records. He still breathed, still walked the earth, but he was a ghost in exile within his own country, not feared, not hated, simply ignored. Some rulers fall with gunfire and fury, others fade beneath the weight of their own blindness. And in Ivory Coast, where the wind still rustles through the leaves of the Cassandra wilderness, the trees whisper a quiet truth. One man remains, not as a warning, but as proof. Proof that when a people decide they are done being broken, not even history will make space for the ones who forgot them. The forest is silent now, the sun rises, a nation moves forward, and beneath the trees a ghost watches unseen.